Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of the Pure Investments Weekly Crypto Podcast. I'm your host, Kai, and I am joined today by Smith.
What's up, guys?
Bowen, our usual co-host, is on vacation in Martha's Vineyard or something. Must be nice. Um,
Sounds
anyway,
nice.
yeah, right? Um, it's a vineyard.
I want some wine now.
Yeah. Let's
Great.
jump into kind of what's happening here, which is not a whole lot, honestly.
Hmm.
Um, you know, more or less the past 3 weeks of these have been, kind of just in that same sideways movement between that 6 to 7,000 range. It feels like the past three times we've done this, we've been kind of sitting right here at like that 62, 6,300. The one thing I guess, Smith, you kind of pointed out is the lesser volume in these dumps that are happening.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Less volatility recently in the dumps.
yeah, and you can kind of see that, if you look, like the volume's not increasingly high. It's actually much lower than the green pops that we had going back this past, week or two. But you can also just kind of tell looking at, the previous dumps, the volume was definitely much higher than these little ones. You can see like here, all of those are much, much less than this. I will say, at least for the moment, unless we just randomly explode up, it does seem like we're kind of tracking another bear flag right now, which
Hmm.
is unfortunate, we'll say. You've got flag one there, and then flag two is kind of forming here. It's possible we have that breakdown to like the next support range around 5,800. I was saying to Smith though before we started recording, I don't see how we get down there.
The
Um,
indicators are really quite low right now. I'd be surprised if we do actually touch the belly around 6,000. I'd be quite
yeah,
surprised.
because like you figure on the 4 hour right now, RSI's at 24, which is nearly the lowest it's been. I think the lowest it got was around 13, back on the 11th or so. Um, but I would have to assume if we're gonna see that next leg down, we're gonna have a flag kind of similar to these last two that we've had, where you kind of flagged upwards a little bit and made like a rising wedge before collapsing down. Because otherwise, I mean, I don't see a way. If we were to drop down to 5,800 right now, RSI in the 4 hour would be like one, you know.
Mm.
And then on the 1 hour, who knows? I mean, 1 hour is 28 right now. It'd probably be like almost zero, which is basically impossible. So we're gonna need a long, lengthy flag. I mean, the last one I guess was almost 2 days. Um, so it's not to say that it can't happen. Um,
I would imagine if we do break upwards at that resistance point at 6,800, there's quite some hefty resistance there. I'd imagine
it
alts will
is.
probably have a good 10, 15, 20% pop across the board, which would be nice. Obviously, that's speculation. We're not quite there yet, but
Yeah, but that 5,800 or so is, I mean, obviously like we've bounced up and down between it, but this is still, there's a common misconception, but this can still be utilized here, like these little ranges and this as support still, because you got to
mm,
figure it's not perfect, right? Like I think people get a little antsy with everything lining up perfect every single time, and that's not always how it works, especially on a coin where you're talking thousands of dollars in pricing. When it's something more like a stock where it's a $20 stock or whatever, usually the lines will line up a little bit better. But when it's this high, you're going to have weird fluctuations. So
mm,
even still, when you look on a daily chart, this kind of lines up with the candle bodies here. You can kind of ignore the wicks. Same thing here. It was a huge tank below it and a huge rip over it, and then you had like the test here, and then these are just kind of flagging around that line. So this 5,800 or 6,800 line, sorry, is definitely very strong.
I feel as though a coin with more leveraged and margin traders trading it has less reliable patterns,
Hmm.
which would confer with what you just said about the price range for Bitcoin being quite
Yeah,
unreliable when you look for certain patterns and you don't have to look for, say, patterns aligning perfectly.
exactly. I mean, for the most part, we try to look at like we said, ranges more so than anything. Um, like ranges are going to be important in stuff like crypto, just because of the the massive swings in price, not so much even the percentages, just the fact that, Bitcoin was 20,000 at one point. It's a very large, like, you don't see that in the stock market. You don't see a $20,000 stock, so charts aren't really meant to be played with that much volatility, typically, at least.
I would say definitely the level of margin traders directly affects a coin's reliability.
Yeah, and I mean, you figure there's billions being traded in margin every day on Bitcoin. But, looking right now, I wouldn't confirm necessarily that this 6,300 line is broken, this little orange support line here. Not until we close the daily. So, I don't really panic on a 1 hour, 4 hour chart, at least not with Bitcoin. If this was a altcoin that was doing this, then sure, on an hourly chart, I can see it saying, oh man, this is breaking down pretty bad. But to me, I'd rather make sure that the daily doesn't just close as a wick here before panicking that we could hit 5,800, because it's completely within the realm of possibility that we jump $200 before the end of the day and end up closing up here around like that 6,300 mark again. We've got, it's 11:30 a.m. right now Eastern, so we've got another 8.5 hours until the daily closes, so a lot can happen in that time frame. By the time you guys watch this, obviously, we'll be a little bit further along. Possibly you'll have already seen the daily close, but just estimating now, that's kind of where I'm looking right now. If we do close the daily below this line, then I would anticipate something like we were talking about, where we kind of get a large like rising wedge, possibly even slightly over this in a few days before breaking down and possibly collapsing back down to this 5,800 mark, which is kind of our, big support right now.
I would say the range that Bitcoin's in at the moment, 5,800 and 6,800, is a no trading zone for me.
Yep.
If you plan to sell alts or rebuy alts, I'd probably wait until you've got a confirmation of a breakdown or a break up from this range that we're currently in.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's not just a no buy zone, it's also like a no sell zone in a way.
Yeah.
If you're buying here, there's the chance that it's going to collapse, and you don't want to be buying here because of that. And if you're selling here, you're really selling what is likely very close to the bottom.
There's definitely not much room for selling at the moment, so I definitely wait for some confirmation. And even when you do get that confirmation, you're going to need to be quick. If you're selling it, it's going to be quite risky.
Yeah, exactly. Sure. We'll have to see if there's any volatility in the volume, which, I mean, there really hasn't been since you can go back to probably almost April, since we've had like real volatility. Like, we've had these big red days, but the volume just hasn't been there.
I'd say if you are looking to short alts, I would short with skepticism, and when you do long, I'd long pretty confidently here if we do break upwards. But if we break downwards, don't be too confident with selling alts, because things are going to happen really quick. Now we're below critical supports.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say, like, just because of how low it is, similar to what we've said, back in April when we were around the 6,500 zone, you're so close to the bottom at this point. Shorting kind of seems a lot more risky than longing.
Definitely.
Obviously, like, quote unquote, not investment advice, but when you get this low, it's one of those things where how much lower can it go? That's kind of what we were just discussing. So the daily has a little bit of room below. RSI's around 40, Stoch's around 36 on the RSI. So, or on the Stoch RSI. So, there's some room on the daily to go down a little bit more. But when you look at the shorter term charts, at least, there's like no room. Anywhere below this, you're basically getting to the point of breaking a chart, which is possible, but I wouldn't anticipate much value in shorting, because even if you're shorting here, maybe you're getting down to 6,000. So,
and there's not a lot of liquidity left in certain lower cap alts at the moment. Even some of the mid to high cap alts are really suffering with liquidity at the moment. So if you are looking to sell to rebuy slightly lower, you might get trapped, even if it is a mid to high cap coin. Sometimes, depending on how much you're trading with, you can just get stuck in the mud.
Now, I will say, if you're holding a coin, I'll use Poe as an example because this happened the other day, where it, a pump and dump group comes through, or a random pump explodes it, please, by all means, feel free to sell on like a 20, 30, 40% pump. Don't assume that it's just going to keep going. I know a lot of us in Pure Investments were holding Poe, and a lot of us sold on the way up, with this little 2 or 3 day explosion here.
Mm.
I offloaded. I was holding a very large amount. I offloaded around 70% of my PO, and I rebought back around the 300 mark. So that was really nice. Basically free money.
Mm.
So but you got to be smart about it. You got to understand that when you look at Poe was running, but nothing else was. There were like 2 or 3 coins that basically got pumped that day, and that was it. So you got to be mindful of that, right? If it's a market turnaround, the whole market turns around, and more likely than not, when the market's turning around, you're not going to see one or two random like 200% pump type things. You're going to see most of the market kind of rebound at once. There'll be obviously bigger and smaller gainers, but you won't see those massive explosions because it's everyone flooding into the market at once.
Mm-hmm.
Pump and dump groups usually tend to avoid times where there's volume influx market wide, just because it's a lot harder for them to do what they want to do. You can kind of see here looking at the volume on Poe, you can't actually see it on the 4-hour chart before the pump because that's how much volume came in. But you go back to like original days and it would have been a lot harder to pump back here. So that's
Mm-hmm.
just something to keep an eye on. And man, I haven't actually like really looked at the volume on this. It's amazing that pump and dump created more volume than ever on
Yes.
Poe. But I mean,
There's a market maker going through Binance coins and pumping this shit out of them.
yeah, but you know what though? Also, if you look, I mean, there's probably still a lot being held from this pump.
Yeah.
But this is what happens, right? When you have these big bear markets, 1 or 2 coins pump, and they don't just go like 30, 50%. They go ballistic because everyone's just looking to trade something out of boredom. Everyone just wants that quick buck because the market's been so red for so long that everyone just jumps into the pump. And that's when they go insane. So I would never recommend riding a pump, but if you're already in one and you just happen to get hit with it, hey, by all means have fun. Scale out on the way up and just ride it as long as you can. I was selling basically like every 100 sats or so. I sold like a nice chunk. So it's free money, and you can never turn down free money in these types of markets. But that's the only time I would recommend selling right now is in a extreme volatile pump. Otherwise, if we jump 4%, 5% on an alt, selling still just kind of seems silly to me. Unless that's like when you bought in and you kind of just want to get out even and wait around, that's fine. But right now is not a time to buy or sell. It's kind of just a time to watch and listen and pay attention to the market.
Yep. We discussed in previous podcasts around March time that we expected Bitcoin to kind of drag out its consolidation period into late summer, and I think that's definitely what it's doing right now.
Yeah. I mean, even going back, I want to say it was probably a month or two ago now, but when we had this run up, I don't know if we were doing the podcast yet then, but I think we were. But talking,
Yeah, we were.
Yeah, talking in our podcast then, and talking, inside, Pure Investments Premium, I had warned a lot of people that this run up back in March and April felt a lot like August of last year, where it was kind of just regaining losses before another large, several month bear period. And basically that's exactly what seems to be happening. If you look at like a daily chart from Poe here, and let me pull up another chart. Hold on. I'm just going to kind of show you what I mean again, because that, last time we discussed that was quite some time ago. So if I pull up Verge, because that's the one I always go to for back then. So
Wow.
if we pull this up and we look at this, right? So here's Verge from last year, and here's that August run up I talked about, right? Don't these look really similar? The spike, the August run up, quote unquote. I mean April run up for this one, and then boom, down a cliff. Boom,
They're
down a cliff.
Both cool off periods.
Now, I mean the timing's a little bit different on them for sure. I don't know exactly. I'm just eyeing it up with looking at it here. So, the timing between these two periods was 75 days this time around. Last time around, it was 75 days. Wow. Wasn't expecting that, but that's beside the point. The bear period right now, at least, has been another 72 days. What was it last time around? Oh, 97 days. So let's assume that it follows a similar track.
August.
Just because of how really similar this first time around was in timing, right? Like almost on the nose. So you'd figure you have like about another 20 days. So yeah, like early August basically, which is would make sense. It would line up really well, for the return of the market. Now I'm not saying we're gonna see this type of return to the market. Hold on, still not all scaled out. I'm not saying we're gonna see this type of return, but for a return of the market, I would say that August is lining up fairly well. But I just kind of wanted to showcase that how similar, the prior alt season cool off was. At the end of the day, the entirety of it, if you even want to we'll go from the very top of the end, or the end of the original bull run, it was 190 days. And right now we are at, if we go like right here, we're at about 187 actually. Interesting. So, it's just something to be mindful of. The pattern is very similar. Yeah, it's not exact, but it's similar. And that's the main takeaway there, is you had that recovering of losses, basically. So it'll be interesting to see how this works. I would say that this time around, it seems to be playing out a little bit longer, though. The bull run period here, the mini, recovery of losses was definitely longer this time around than it was back in, August of last year. August of last year was like a 2-week period. This one was like a month. So I still think I would say that August timeline seems nice. Seems like a lot of things would line up well there. Going back to just Bitcoin now, if we were to say August for Bitcoin, because say they all run at the same time, which is plausible. Wouldn't be the first time it happened. Wouldn't be the last. Looking at this, right? So say August, if we did go down to around this 5,800 line one more time, you're probably talking the weekly RSI being around like 35-ish, which would also, line up pretty well. I would assume VixFix is going to trigger here any day now, actually, as well. Just seems like these lines are very, very thick. But so August seems to line up pretty solidly. I am curious on something here, just out of a linear view. No, all right. I was curious if there was any kind of like daily roundup here, because if you look, it's kind of these, these big peaks that just keep getting smaller. But we're not really having
What time
that.
frame were you just on the?
I was on the
last
weekly
chart?
here.
Oh, look at that overhead resistance on the MACD. That's just waiting to break out.
Right here.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
overhead resistance.
Mm-hmm.
Looks, I can imagine when that gets broken, that'll probably trigger the new phase of the market cycle.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as soon as that weekly MACD crosses, you would have to assume that that's going to be...
And what's your bottom indicator? Is that a reversal indicator?
This is squeeze momentum. Yeah, so it's basically a momentum indicator. So the, bright green is on the way up, dark green's on the way down.
And what's the blue dot currently?
The blue dot implies volatility around the corner.
Oh, okay.
So, like you could see how this was just like all of 2017 was just blue dots lit up the whole way, and it was volatile the entire time, that usually indicates the volatility change. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out, actually. This is the first time I'm looking at the weekly chart in a while. So, you kind of can't look at the weekly chart too often. You look at it every day, it's just going to be like looking at the same, brand new wall of paint, because nothing changes.
Yeah.
So that's actually interesting now that you pointed that out. I mean, we still have, what's today? Today's Thursday? So we still have like 3 days? Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 4 days for the weekly candle to close. I'd be interested to see where the weekly candle closes. Over this 6,300 mark, similar to what I was talking about on the daily, I think would be nice. The daily chart is interesting because we could actually bounce today to keep the MACD from crossing down. It wouldn't be the end of the world if we didn't. I'm just throwing it out there as a possibility. You kind of have, at least on Stoke here, an exaggerated bullish divergence here, because you've got, if you look at the price here, right?
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, and then if you look at Stoke, though, it's kind of flat across. So it's a little exaggerated there. And same thing with RSI here, too, RSI was 30, and now we're back up at 42. So that's just riding the pine with it. But this is I'm more interested in, because if this were to close more down here with the price not following up and matching up here, you'd start to get a little bit of a um, bullish divergence there. But all in all, the primary thing that we keep kind of hammering home is the volume. That's really what we're waiting on still.
Mm.
We need that volatile volume increase, and it's not like we have low volume necessarily. I mean, it's still significantly higher than it was going into 2017, and even the beginning of the bull run back in 2017. It's like right about at that same mark. But if we go over here to Coin Market Cap, you can kind of see the difference in volume. If I just stretch this here, we were having, back in, what is this? This is going to be like December, in that run up, we were having like 40, 50 million or $1 billion in volume every day. Right now we've got about 11, 12. So, we're at basically like a quarter of the volume of the big bull run. Sometimes even lower. I mean, there were days like this one where it's $67 billion in volume. So, until we get out of this $10 billion volume section, basically, that's just kind of death hugging the market, it's going to be a little rough, because you got to take into account, like, yeah, the volume was lower here, but that's USD volume being lower. Bitcoin at this point was only like $1,000, $2,000. It's going to be harder to trade as much volume there. But that's the big part right now, is as soon as we see this return to volume, we'll see a turnaround. But until that point, because you can even see here, right, like the that April-May run up here, we went from that 10 billion a day up to like 25 billion a day, 30 billion a day. And we saw, a really nice little bull run during that period. So that's basically what we're looking for again. Alt volume is also just kind of pitiful. Alt volume during the run up was, in that 20-30 billion dollar range, and right now it's 7-8 billion. So those are all the things that we're really primarily keeping an eye on right now. Because until that volume returns, there's not, as Bowen and I have told you like the past 2 or 3 weeks, there's really not a whole lot of reason to discuss alts. They're just going to kind of look like this, where everything's slightly red. Here, I'll drag this out so we can see it, but everything just kind of looks like crap. It's all like 3%, 4% losses. Randomly salt's up 8% today. I don't know why. It's not on high volume. It's probably just a random little pump.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how much further, if they do go lower, alts plan to go. So Kai just said that alts aren't really doing a whole lot right now. We're not paying too much attention to them. Although I would say that's not to get confused with Bitcoin being in a no trade zone. I would definitely say that altcoins are in an accumulation zone for long term. It's just a question of how much further lower they want to go, if anything lower. Like, they could be bottoming out here very soon. We did speak about August being a potential reversal period. So
yeah.
if that was to play out, I would say alts are near or very close to maximum financial opportunity, which, so like I said, not to get confused with Bitcoin being in a no trade zone, I would definitely say that alts across the board are looking good for accumulation long term.
I would just say it's more, so alts I could see still dropping another 15 to 30%, but it's more the fact that I could also see them starting their big runs up, any day or week now. So while there may be a 30% downside, you're talking a several 100% upside. So it's kind of that, risk management thing that we always discuss. Is it worth the risk of a 20% loss for the potential of a 500% gain, say, just throwing out a random number. If we run back up to this 600-700 range, for example, on Poe, well, from 253 entry, that's going to be some really nice returns. If we drop back down to this 215, 210 low, that's not a big deal. Especially considering all the dropping we've had, at a certain point, you've got to look at it and say, most of these alts are down 90-something% from their peaks, I don't even know. It might actually be over 90. Let's see. Now I'm kind of curious. So let's see. From the peak on this, we'll just do Poe because I have it up. So we're down, 90% basically at the low. So how much further can they go down from that height, you know? And not all of them are down that much, you know. Some of them have held on a little bit better. TRX,
Off Binance.
yeah, you know, TRX is only down 75%. You know, IOST.
Take a look at Binance.
Oh, BNB is, where's that at? I have that up here somewhere. Here we go. Man, remember when I called that buy down here?
Yep,
at
I do
1800
actually.
sats, and I didn't follow my own buy. Then I called it here, and I didn't follow my own buy. Yeah, I should have a lot of BNB. Unfortunately, I only ever bought like 50 of them just for fees.
It's interesting how low the stock RSI is in comparison to how high price action is here.
Well, you see right here, it's actually on support.
Yep.
Right here, this like 1900 support is actually pretty strong because that's a triple. That was a triple top that it broke over. And now it's retesting. If it holds here, I mean, that's a really good sign. And not just Stoke. I mean, look at it hasn't even fallen that far, but look at how insane RSI tailed down.
Yeah, just looks like a falling wedge on the RSI.
Yeah, like the RSI tanked, Stoke tanked, everything tanked on it. I mean, and now it's sitting right here. Remind me after this to post this in premium because I hadn't really noticed it. But yeah, maybe another 1,000 sats or so down to like this 18.6 range, 18.7 range. But I'd probably be comfortable buying around 19, you know, and then you could just probably set a small stop a little bit below that. But this is a nice setup actually. It's not completely formed yet. You know, I still think this has a little bit more downward trajectory. But this could get down to this, you know, this little white line here and probably be around 30 RSI on the daily.
I always kick myself for selling Binance way too early.
Yeah, every time I've had it, I sold it too early. I
accumulated mid last year, and I sold like a few months into mid last year. Imagine if I'd have just held that. Jesus, that is a big gain.
I mean, even back at the bear market, I called this, and then the next day they announced whatever it was, like they're staking or something. And literally this explosion happened, and I was like, oh, look at that. And I just hadn't had a chance to buy yet.
Over time.
Yeah, like I was waiting to free up some funds to buy here, and I just didn't get a chance before it erupted. And then it like jumped up to here, and I was like, well, I'm not going to chase it now. Still should have chased it, huh? You know what? This is like a good learning experience, right? I could have chased here, and I would have made gains, but 9 times out of 10, if I chased up here, it would have came back down. And that's a reason why you don't chase. Just because there's one time where it would have worked out doesn't mean that you should do it. More often than not, it's not going to work out. If there's anybody who watches, baseball, for example, there's a reason you take, a pitch that's like on the outside corner, because more often than not, you're not going to get a hit on that anyway, but it could be a ball. So you don't swing at it. It's the same concept. More often than not, this is going to be a trap and it's going to collapse down. You're going to be stuck in it. So you don't take it just because there's that 1 or 2 times where it keeps running. If you were in before the run, that's when you stay in. You don't chase the run, though. Ever. Even if you saw it before it happened and you didn't get in, you still don't chase it. And you'll be better off in the long run for it. But I don't know. I don't really have anything else. Do you have anything else that you wanted to kind of gloss over here, Smith?
I think we've covered everything that I had in mind to speak about.
All right, cool. So we're going to call that for today. We will be back next week, hopefully earlier in the week. This week Bowen was on vacation and we kind of just didn't have everything planned out for Tuesday, hence the later week release. So we might talk to you guys again in like 4 or 5 days here. So yeah, that'll about do it for us. I've been Kai. The other guy's been Smith. I almost said Bowen, but you're definitely not Bowen.
Definitely not Bowen.
And we will see you guys next week.
See you later, guys.
Adios.